New York, Bronx 15 years ago. The summer rain poured down on the squatter camp like a torrent. The puddles were gray, mixing with engine oil and garbage from broken drains. Jamal, then only 9 years old, sat barefoot in torn shorts, huddled under the porch, clutching a paper bag containing his last loaf of bread for the day. His mother, Gloria, had just finished her shift at the city hospital. The small woman wore a white blouse stained with dried blood. Her face tired, but her eyes still lit up when she saw Jamal running out to greet her. "Is anyone bothering you again?" she asked, hurriedly pulling her inside before it got dark. "No, Mom." Jamal smiled wryly, covering his left hand, which was red and swollen from a fight with a kid 2 years older than him. All because the kid had snatched his old book, the one he had found in the trash behind the school. Jamal's family is one of more than 20 families living in a squatter camp on the corner of 183rd Street. His father, Raymond, a mechanic and container truck driver, died in an accidental shootout between police and gangs. Jamal can no longer remember his father's face. But he does remember one thing. He taught him to run fast to stay out of trouble. Despite his mother's efforts to work, days without food were inevitable. Sometimes Jamal had to eat bread smuggled into his pocket from a nearby church. One day, the family had to turn off the lights to save money. But Gloria never let her children get discouraged. "We are not rich, but we cannot give up," she often said. When Jamal was 10, his mother became seriously ill with kidney disease. She continued to work, but he saw a difference in the way she walked, the way she held onto the stairs, and the nights she lay still, unable to breathe, because of the pain. One day, Jamal was stopped by a group of young men at the corner of his alley. The men, cousins of a local drug dealer, wanted him to be a lookout for an illegal delivery. "Just whistle if you see the cops," they said. Jamal refused, and got beaten. 3 days later, Jamal returned, nodding silently. It was raining that day too. He stood at the corner of the alley, staring at the intersection. His heart was in turmoil, fear, disgust, and anger at himself. But just a few minutes later, a car horn sounded. A police car was approaching from the opposite direction. The young men scattered. One stumbled and fell, caught. Jamal stood frozen, not knowing whether to run or not, when 2 officers closed in. "Kid, what's that in your hand?" An officer searched his pockets, only to find a toy whistle. A coin and a piece of paper with the appointment time, 1845, same place. At the 44th Precinct Police Station, Jamal sat shaking. He said nothing. They had no evidence to charge him. But state law allowed minors to be held for further investigation. As he was dozing off on the chair, a low voice came from the door. "The boy is not the kind you should be keeping in custody. He is simply the product of a forgotten society." A woman in a long gray coat entered, silver hair, sharp eyes. She did not give her name, but held out a card with an eagle symbol. The police changed their attitude immediately. "The boy's guardian?" they asked. "No need. I take responsibility." She leaned down, looking Jamal in the eye. "You don't know who I am. And you don't need to. But remember, you weren't arrested today, because someone believed you could be something more." A few days later, Jamal came home. His mother never knew what had happened. He never told. But that night, as he lay staring at the leaky ceiling, he made a promise to himself. He would never let anyone save him again. Years later, Jamal became the top track athlete in his high school. His performance broke the school record and caught the attention of the coach of the youth Olympic team. He thought, finally found a way to escape the Bronx. But life, as usual, did not give him an easy time. One morning, just before the regional Olympic qualifiers, he was called into the Federation office. They said his sample had tested positive for doping. He was stunned. Jamal never used drugs. Never. But the evidence doesn't lie, or at least, no one thinks it can. The incident was reported in the newspapers. Jamal was banned indefinitely. He refused to speak to the press. His mother was devastated. His dreams were shattered. No one knew that among the audience that day was an old woman, wearing dark glasses, sitting in the back row of the stands, when the name, Jamal Tyson, disqualified, appeared on the board. She smiled, then left. Jamal doesn't play anymore, doesn't go to college, doesn't pursue anything. He became an Amazon delivery man. He was silent. He worked. He paid off his hospital bills. He lived like an invisible person in the middle of a bustling city. Until that day, when he saved an old lady from being robbed, and heard her mention SEAL Team 6. Fourth floor, 127 West 85th Street. Jamal stood in front of the apartment where he had rescued the old woman 3 days earlier. It was dusk, the March air still crisp, the wind whistling through the old windows. The long, narrow hallway, its fluorescent lights flickering, gave it the look of a Cold War spy movie. He didn't know what was driving him back, partly out of curiosity, partly out of fear, but deep inside, there was something hard to name, a feeling that his life was crossing a threshold from which there was no turning back. The name Eleanor G. Walsh still echoed in his mind. The Google search results didn't say much, but they were startling. Some links to old articles. Eleanor Walsh, the woman behind Cold War deals. The CIA director who was hidden after 2002. Walsh, the man who changed how America recruited spies. There's even an interview from the 90s, when she was still in intelligence. Look for the people no one is looking at. The people who are left out of the system. They are often the turning points. Jamal knocked on the door. No one answered. He was about to turn away when the door opened, soundlessly. Without a latch. The apartment was dark, but he walked in anyway. The interior was a stark contrast to the shabby exterior. The walls were soundproofed with thick padding. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves were filled with classified documents. Files, old maps, satellite images. There was a CD printer, a fax machine, and a light board that still worked, illuminating an image. A high school portrait of himself, Jamal Tyson. You found it? Eleanor's voice rang out behind her. Jamal turned around. The old woman stood in the kitchen doorway, wearing a dressing gown, holding a cup of tea. He was startled. How did you know I was coming? Because I used to be the one who trained people who thought they were choosing their own path. She smiled. But in reality, we were just playing a game that had been set for a long time. They sat across from each other in the small kitchen. Eleanor sipped her tea slowly, her sharp eyes watching him as if assessing his every move. You think the robbery was an accident? Jamal narrowed his eyes. You say, staged? Not exactly, she replied. I facilitate. It is your reaction. Jamal was silent for a moment. He took a deep breath. Why me? Who are you really? She didn't answer right away. She stood up and pulled a brown folder from a drawer. She put it on the table. This is everything we know about you since you were 6 years old. He opened it. Old photos, himself sitting in class. Medical reports. Track records. First violation notice. Rejected scholarship applications. There was a handwritten letter from his mother, never sent, marked confidential. We keep a close eye on people like you. People who are highly adaptable. Have above average reaction speeds. But don't belong to the system. Who are we? Jamal asked. Eleanor leaned forward. People who believed in a different America. An America that appreciated those who didn't need a trophy to do what was right. After a moment of silence, she placed her hand on the file. I used to head a program called ARC, Advanced Recruitment Colonel. An underground effort to recruit unaffiliated individuals. Unattached to the military, police, or politics. Good ghosts, if you will. Like a free agent? Jamal asked. Agents are doers. You are the catalyst, she replied. You don't obey. You understand, and act. Jamal still wasn't convinced. Why me? There are hundreds of people out there stronger than me, smarter than me, but none of them ever stood on the line between being buried and rising to their feet. There was a long silence. Then Jamal sighed and shook his head. I'm just a delivery guy. I don't want anything to do with the CIA, intelligence, or anything that would get me a gun to my head. You say that. Eleanor looked at him intently. But you put yourself in the gun's mouth when you saved me. That action cannot be undone. Jamal stood up. He needed to get out of here. He needed to breathe. He needed to wake up. You want to go? Go. Eleanor called after him. But if after 3 days you still have questions, come to this address. She slid a small piece of paper towards him. Jamal left the apartment, his mind reeling. He walked the miles home, not remembering the streets he had crossed. Memories flooded his mind. The robbery. Eleanor's eyes. The CIA badge. The file. And the terrifying feeling that he was a character in a story someone else had written. He looked at the paper. Station BX 4:30 AM, Platform 9. Only for those who dare to ask. If not me, then who? New York, summer 2015. The Queen's Stadium was ablaze with lights. Thousands of spectators applauded loudly. And American flags fluttered throughout the stands. It was the final qualifying session to select the young athletes for the Los Angeles Olympics. Jamal Tyson, 19, representing the Bronx Community Sports Academy, was about to enter the 400-meter race, an event he had been undefeated in for the past 2 years. In a dark blue tracksuit with the 3 words Tyson printed on his back. His head was shaved short. His face was determined as if carved from stone. Outside, his mother sat in the back row, her thin hands clutching a frayed wooden rosary. "Run," she whispered. "Run from your fate." The whistle blew. Jamal's feet shot out of the starting line like springs. His strides were steady, his breathing rapid, but not hurried. In his mind, all that remained was the track, the wind, and the image of his dead father, always standing at the end of the track. Smiling and waiting. On the final lap, he surged ahead of his 2 leading rivals, crossing the finish line to thunderous applause. "New record," the announcer shouted. 46.08 seconds. Jamal Tyson, the hero of the Bronx. He raised his hands to the sky, looked up at the stands where his mother was crying, and smiled brightly. That was the moment he thought. Finally, all the efforts, all the sacrifices, all the humiliations of his childhood had paid off. But 3 days later, at the National Athletics Federation office, he was called in to hear the verdict from the Board of Control. The test results of urine sample A showed the presence of methylhexanamine, a stimulant on the banned list. Jamal was speechless. "No way. I never used that stuff. No drugs. No nothing. We don't think you did it on purpose. But the results are enough to disqualify you from the competition." A man in a black suit, he didn't give his name, just handed him a piece of paper and asked him to sign it. "Here is the consensus. Reject the appeal and withdraw from the Olympic squad." Jamal clenched his fists. "Who did this to me?" The man smiled. "Who do you think you are to make people play tricks?" His name was removed from the list. The media called it the Bronx Shock. They talked about lost hope, about a sad case, and then moved on to the next star. No one stood up for him. The coach shook his head. The school was silent. His mother had to cut off her medical insurance because her scholarship was gone. Jamal disappeared from the sports map as if he had never existed. 2 weeks later, in a fit of melancholy, Jamal returned to the old stadium, quietly running around the track in the dark. And in the empty stands, there was an elderly woman waiting. "You run on rhythm," she said, without introducing herself, "but your mental reflexes are not perfect. You lean slightly to the right at step 39. Someone noticed that and exploited it." Jamal looked at her suspiciously. "Who are you?" "The one who discovered the discrepancy in sports biometrics. And the one who knew your sample had been switched." He was stunned. "How did you know?" "Because I was following this case from before it started." She showed him a photo. A picture of the man in the black suit that day, coming out of a secure room of the Federation, holding a glass bottle. "Who does he work for?" Jamal asked. "For an international sports governing body, where they only select those who are controllable," she said, standing up. "You, Jamal Tyson, are too independent, too dangerous for them. So, why didn't you say so?" "Because that system cannot be broken by denunciation," she replied. "Only from within." Jamal chuckled. "I don't want to be a spy. I want to live in peace." "You can be at peace. But who will help other children whose dreams were robbed like you?" After that meeting, Jamal never saw the woman again. He returned to his normal life, applied for a job at Amazon, lived in seclusion, and refused all invitations to return to local competitions. But the questions remain. Why does she care about me? What is her connection to the person who ruined his career? Until he saves the old lady from a robbery, and realizes it's the same woman from all those years ago. Eleanor Walsh, the man who silently pulled the strings in the dark. 3 days later, at the abandoned station BX, Jamal arrived just as the note said. The platform was dusty, but the fluorescent lights were still dimly lit. This used to be the last stop of the old subway line. But it had been closed since 1987. A group of people stood scattered at the end of the platform, 5 people. Men and women of all shapes and sizes, all silently watching Jamal as he approached. No one said anything. No one introduced themselves. An iron door opened behind them, and Eleanor appeared. "Welcome to the inner circle." The room was so deep behind the bus station platform that the sound of the train running above ground was only a faint vibration underfoot. No one spoke as Jamal stood in front of the filing cabinet bearing his name, Tyson. Jamal, candidate type 10. His hands shook slightly as he opened the gray metal door. Inside, in addition to a file of more than 300 pages, was a small wooden box, carefully preserved as a keepsake. He opened the box. A handwritten letter. The paper discolored by time. The familiar slanted handwriting, it was his mother's. To Jamal, "If you ever read this, it means I'm no longer around to answer the questions I thought were best kept to myself. But you deserve to know the truth about your father, and about yourself." Jamal took a deep breath and sat down on a nearby metal chair. The fluorescent light above flickering like the breath of a ghost. His mother had told him that his father was a good man who had died in a shootout between the police and a local gang. It was a story everyone in the neighborhood knew. A tragedy like hundreds of other Bronx tragedies. But in the letter, the truth is written in trembling and tormented lines. Your father was no ordinary mechanic. Jamal. He was a tactical operator for a federal intelligence branch, a clean unit. Meaning no one acknowledged their existence. Not even in internal records. Once, he was ordered to participate in a dual data collection, a mission to monitor and infiltrate two underground armed organizations at the same time, using two different identities. After realizing that the mission involved transporting banned biological weapons, your father refused to continue. He didn't want to be a blind person, and even less did he want to let you grow up in the darkness of sin. 3 weeks later, he was ambushed on his way home. They staged a gang shootout to cover up a planned hit. I know because someone told me. An old woman, in a gray coat, left this letter with the message. Keep it until the boy is strong enough to hear the truth. Jamal folded the letter. His heart was pounding, not with fear, with anger. He had lived his whole life with a version of his past edited by those who wanted to hide the filth of the system. He had hated the Bronx for taking his father. But now he knew. It wasn't the Bronx. It was a deeper, quieter, and more sinister network. Eleanor stepped forward and put her hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry. I couldn't stop it, but I could do something else, prepare you. Have you been to see my mother? He asked hoarsely. Right after your father's funeral. Eleanor nodded. I wanted to protect her. And you. But your mother refused any support. She said, if I let my son grow up like a pawn, it would be like killing my husband for nothing. So why did you come to me now? Jamal turned, his eyes burning. Because I saved you? Or because you think I'm old enough to be activated? Eleanor looked him straight in the eye. Because I don't have much time left. And because you're one of the few people I trust who will retain their humanity after learning the truth. The metal door behind him swung open. A tanned man in his early 40s stepped in. Short-sleeved shirt, a tattoo of a map of Iraq on his arm. Is this Tyson? He said. His voice low and husky. I'm Monroe. We need to talk. Jamal nodded slightly. Before he could process it, Monroe handed him a small USB drive. Here's the raw data from the early years of the ARC project. There's also a videotape of an internal conversation in 2001 where some high-ranking agents suggested eliminating your father. You have that part? Jamal clenched his fists. Monroe nodded. And not only that, I know who carried out the order. He's alive, and under protection. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Eleanor crossed her arms, looking at Jamal. This is where you have to decide. You can either walk out of here, continue making deliveries, pretending that what you just learned doesn't exist, or you can walk in, and understand that every choice from now on has a price. Jamal looked at the USB drive in his hand. Part of him wanted to throw it away. Back to the small rented room. Back to the orders. Back to the invisible rhythm of life. But the other part, the part from his father who died to keep him from becoming a puppet, that part wouldn't let him turn away. What do you need me to do first? Eleanor smiled. Let's start with something simple. Find the man your father last spoke to. Someone who was in the same unit. Now going by the codename Sable. We believe he's living undercover, right here in New York. Brooklyn 2:13 p.m. On the narrow street, a refrigerated truck labeled River Fresh Delivery sits quietly at the curb. An old part of the industrial landscape. No one pays any attention to the driver in a baseball cap and sunglasses, examining a fake delivery order printed on ivory paper. But in reality, no one has placed an order. Jamal got out of the car, a cooler bag over his shoulder. Inside was a hard drive and a stun gun. He had been training for this moment for the past 4 nights in the underground training center under Station BX. Not to kill anyone, but to interrogate a ghost that had survived the old system. Codename Sable. The last person to have contact with his father before he was erased. The warehouse is located at the end of an alley behind the migrant market, a former fish processing factory. Now with only the old sign and a rusty bell by the iron gate remaining. Jamal knocked 3 times, just as Eleanor instructed. A small magic eye opened. River Fresh, Jamal said. Deliver frozen goods to Mr. Ellis. The iron lock turned slowly. A tall, pale-skinned man with close-cropped white hair opened the door. He looked at Jamal carefully, then nodded slightly. Take the side path. The main path is jammed. Jamal followed the directions, walking down a dim hallway. LED lights flashing like old submarine beacons. The air here was as cold as a freezer. He heard the door close behind him. The basement storage room was narrow and dim, smelling of dried fish and preservatives. The walls were lined with crates covered with blue tarps, stacked in a maze. In the middle, a metal table held a blowtorch, a set of mechanical tools, and, oddly, an old picture frame covered in canvas. Are you Sable? Jamal asked, without beating around the bush. The man put down the soldering iron and looked up. His eyes were as still as water. No one has called me by that name for 20 years. Jamal pulled out his mother's handwritten letter, a photocopy, and his father's photo from Eleanor's file. You were the last person to see my father alive. I need the truth. Sable was silent. After a moment, he pulled up a chair and sat across from Jamal. What is your name? Jamal Tyson. The name made Sable close his eyes for a moment. It was as if an old pain had suddenly returned. Then he opened his eyes and spoke slowly. Your father, Ray, is not the type to be easily subdued. Although in the business, we call him the gatekeeper. Because he never lets classified data cross borders without question. What data? Jamal asked. Sable nodded toward the table. Data on a program to develop a targeted virus, a bioweapon with an ethical code. It can recognize target DNA and kill only the flagged groups of people. Jamal's spine shivered. You mean, a weapon that can't select races? Sable nodded. Ray was the one who first discovered it while undercover at the European lab. When he refused to hand over the drive containing the evidence, the order was given to destroy it. Were you there that day? Jamal asked. Sable stood up and pulled a small tin box from the drawer under her desk. Inside was an old, faded VHS tape. BX_TX17_04. I was the one sent to go with him. I was supposed to protect him. But when the order came from the man I served for 18 years, I ran away. Did you see who killed him? Jamal asked, his voice low. Sable looked him straight in the eye. Not the police. Not the gang. The Black Ops, agents without numbers. Without ranks. Without assignments. I knew then that I had signed the death warrant of an honest man. Jamal clenched his fists. I need this tape. I need the truth out. It's not easy. Sable sighed. There's an organization behind it. Not the government. Not the CIA anymore. But a self-sustaining, post-intelligence network known as Alex. Alex? Jamal frowned. Sable pulled the cloth over the frame. Below were photos of 8 people, 5 men, 3 women, with code numbers. The text at the bottom. Alex Directive, Shadow Oversight Unit. Primary targets. Walsh, Reeve, Tyson. Jamal was stunned. Walsh, is that Eleanor? Yes. And Reeve, a cryptologist who deciphered the data stream your father brought back, is now missing. Alex wants to destroy everyone who knows about the Clean Bloom program. Clean Bloom? Jamal repeated. It's the internal code for a selective biological weapon. The first prototype was developed in an underground facility near the Texas-Mexico border. If Alex recovers it, they could wage war without a battlefield. Jamal took the VHS tape and put it in his pocket. I'll find Reeve, and if I can, I'll make Alex show himself. Sable handed him a small key. 3rd vault in the cold storage. Inside is the hard drive with the copy of the file Ray hid. You need to bring it back to Eleanor. But remember, they may have tracked you down. As soon as he stepped out of the warehouse, Jamal noticed something was wrong. A black SUV was parked in the opposite direction 2 blocks away. The person inside did not turn off the engine, but did not get out. The rear window was slightly ajar. A camera lens pointed at him. He turned and rushed toward the River Fresh car. Just as the car door closed, a bullet hit the body of the car behind him. He screamed, "Damn!" Station BX Basement 3:27 a.m. The screen shuddered as it played back the last memories of a man facing death. In the old tape, Ray Tyson, Jamal's father, sat facing the camera. His eyes sharp but heavy. His voice caught at the end of his sentence. "If anyone is watching this, it means I didn't come back. But if you're Jamal, then son, you still have a chance to stop them from doing the most terrible thing in human history." The control room was as quiet as a tomb. Jamal was silent. He did not cry. Tears were not enough to express the feeling of having his whole life stripped away in a few minutes. Eleanor sat across from him, her white hair disheveled in the dim light, but her voice was steady as steel. "Do you know why I didn't stop your father?" Jamal shook his head. "Because I used to believe the system could fix itself," she said slowly. "But after Ray died, I understood. Some things don't belong to the government anymore. They belong to the people behind it." She pressed a button on her computer. Switching to another screen, a strange interface appeared, with grid symbols. Clover Module, a system linking secret global surveillance stations. Eleanor explained. "Alex is not an agency. It is a group of influential individuals, political, technological, defense, who run an autonomous network, without the need for congressional or UN approval." "What about Clover?" Jamal asked. "It's the Clean Bloom Weapon Activation Protocol. They need 3 key pieces of code: seed, pulse, and root, to create a new version of the selected biovirus." Jamal clenched his fists. "And they're trying to reboot it?" "No more trying, Jamal," Eleanor replied, her eyes stern. "They're meeting right now to discuss transferring the root code to a new partner, under the guise of a post-pandemic biodefense project." She pointed to a square on the screen, below which it said, "Geneva, International Congress of Applied Biology 4 days from now." That's where they'll deliver the codes. And one of the delegates is Agent Alex, the former U.S. Biosecurity Coordinator, now acting as a representative of the Joint Microbiology Research Institute. "Do you know who he is?" Jamal asked. Eleanor nodded. "His real name is Thomas Elbridge. But according to old records, he was the commander of the black unit that took down your father." Jamal stood up. He paced around the room like a caged animal. "What are you going to do?" "Take him there," said Eleanor, "as a technical officer of the American delegation." "How do I get in?" Jamal asked. "We have the fake ID. The full digital background. You just need to put the fake, root, hard drive in his hand, to mark the signal. And we will track it remotely." "And if we get caught?" Jamal asked. Eleanor pursed her lips. "Then Alex will do what they always do to people like you and your father, wipe them out." Jamal sat down, resting his hands on his knees. Waves of memories flooded back: his mother, the Bronx, the Olympic Stadium, his career setback, his father's death, the unsent letter. He looked up. "I'm leaving. Not for you. Not for the system. For my father." Eleanor said nothing. She handed him a small velvet box. Inside was a simple silver ring. "Your father left it to me. He said, if my child must enter this world, let him carry some light from those who came before him." Jamal put the ring on his right ring finger. In the days that followed, Jamal entered intensive training. Practice speaking French and biology. Get familiar with the server signal capture tool. Techniques to avoid thermal scanners and read eye movements. Special. Control biological response. Do not let the heart beat beyond the threshold when being questioned. Under the training of Monroe, a former field agent, and Eleanor, he gradually transforms, no longer a delivery boy rushing on the street, but a man about to face a secret network that could ignite global biological warfare. The night before departure, Jamal stood alone on the bus station rooftop. New York was still bright. Car lights raced down the street like blood flowing through the veins of a giant body. Eleanor stepped beside him. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was determined. "You know, I used to have a son. Jamal looked at her, silent. He died at 9. Suicide. He couldn't handle the pressure of being watched all the time. I thought I was protecting him, but I was just turning him into a living experiment. You spy on your own son? Jamal whispered. It wasn't about watching. It was about preparing. I let fear control everything. She turned to him. I don't want to make that mistake with you. But now, the choice is yours. Jamal looked out at the horizon. There was a long silence. No one deserves to be forgotten like my father, he said, his eyes shining. And no one deserves to die for a project the world has never heard of. Geneva, Switzerland, Intermont du Lac Hotel, 9:42 a.m. The air inside the convention center was thick with the sounds of people talking. Projectors spinning, and glasses clinking. Even though it was early in the morning, the entire ground floor of the Intermont du Lac Hotel was bustling with delegations from more than 40 countries. Jamal walked slowly through the crowd, keeping a pace that wouldn't stand out. He wore a dark blue suit, white shirt, and name tag. Dr. J. Mallory, Digital Biolab Tech, United States delegation. In his hand he held a laptop bag. But inside was not a computer, but a clean Bloom dummy drive, designed to activate its location when it came close to ALIX's real decoder. In his right ear, a small earbud-like headset kept him in touch with Eleanor and Monroe, who were monitoring from a coded signal station 3 blocks away. Eleanor's voice echoed softly through the sound waves. Don't approach Elbridge right away. Go straight to the technical room. Check the system. Then get the access point. Jamal nodded, not answering. He knew he was carrying a biological bomb in the form of data. And if he made one wrong move, it would all go off. Literally and figuratively. 10:15 a.m., Biotechnology Coordination Room. Jamal walked into the tech room as assigned. 3 other techs were already working, none of them paying him any attention. He set down his briefcase, pretended to adjust the monitor, and connected the special plug from the dummy socket to the secondary Ethernet port on the back of the main router. Just 40 seconds. The headset pinged 3 times. Monroe confirmed. Good. Locator active. Hold position for 5 minutes to mark nearby network devices. Jamal didn't answer. As he waited, he glanced around. On the back wall of the room were photographs of delegates to the afternoon's closed-door discussion, entitled, Ethical Discourse in Bio-Directed Biology. One of the men in the photo was Thomas Elbridge, silver-haired, deep-eyed, in a 3-piece suit, the kind of man who could stand before a scientific panel and trick them into believing he was saving the world, while in fact programming its selective destruction. 1102 Main Hall. 2nd floor. Jamal retreated from the engineering room, moving as he had been programmed. He blended into the crowd, his eyes scanning for Elbridge. Finally, he found him, standing next to 2 men in civilian clothes. Probably Alex Internal Security. Jamal walked toward the bar, about 10 meters away, pretending to get a drink. He placed his right hand on the bar. His father's silver ring would act as a jammer, if Elbridge had brought the real clean Bloom. And just as Eleanor predicted, the ring vibrated slightly. He is wearing the real code. Monroe's voice rang in his ears. Good. Hold. We're locking on. We'll have a primary in about 4 minutes. Jamal tried to act normal. But just then, a hand gently placed on his shoulder from behind. A deep, warm and very American voice. Jamal Tyson. He turned around. The man in front of him was in his late 40s, with a goatee and light gray eyes, dressed in plain clothes with a badge that read, Mark Daniels, Stanford Biotech Department. The name made Jamal feel like he had been doused with ice water. Mark Daniels, one of the original ARC members, who Eleanor once mentioned as betrayed and disappeared after revealing information to Alex. I thought you were dead. Mark chuckled. With ARC? Yes. With Alex. I'm a used pawn, but I'm still alive, and you shouldn't be here. Jamal narrowed his eyes. Why? Because the people you trust aren't telling you the whole truth. They withdrew to a deserted corner of the hallway. Mark stared at him. Eleanor started the ARC to protect humanity from biological warfare. That's true. But after Ray Tyson died, she changed. Changed how? Jamal asked. She's not just against Alex anymore. She wants control of that weapon, to restore the balance of power. Meaning, if Alex has clean Bloom, she wants a version 2. She never said that, Jamal shook his head. Because you're the son of the only person she ever owed a favor to. Mark insisted. You think Eleanor chose you out of morals? No, because you're the missing piece, the original Ray Tyson gene. And if she could create a version of the virus that was genetically resistant to the clean bloom, you'd be the key. Jamal took a step back. She used me to create a counter-vaccine? Not only that, Mark said, then whispered, you are a rude human. If you were genetically analyzed and put into a biological server, you could decode the entire structure of Clean Bloom. Which means, Alex is also targeting you. Jamal stood motionless. So what are you doing here? He asked. Mark chuckled. I'm not on either side anymore. All I know is, if you fall into Alex or Eleanor's hands, you'll never be the same again. Eleanor's voice echoed in the headset. Jamal, you've been out of contact for 2 minutes. What's the situation? Back off now. Repeat. Back off now. Jamal looked at Mark. What should I do? Mark looked at his watch. This afternoon, in closed session, Elbridge leaves the conference room in 6 minutes to meet with the Middle Eastern partner representative in Basement C. If you can track him down and get a real tracker, we could have access to the entire Alex network. What about Eleanor? You have 2 ears. Just take out the earbuds. It's that simple. Intermont Hotel, Geneva, Basement C 1838. The air in the basement was thick with the smell of bleach and hot wires. Air conditioning ducts ran along the ceiling like a network of veins. Jamal stood with his back against the brick wall, his eyes glued to the stainless steel front door, where Thomas Elbridge had just entered to meet his biotech partner from the Middle East. His hand tightened around the real tracking device, a small chip embedded in a metal surface that could send real-time location to civilian satellites. Mark's voice came softly over the intercom. Elbridge will be out in 90 seconds. Once he leaves the desk, he has 7 to 9 seconds to access the briefcase. He always locks the device in the left pocket of his leather bag. Don't touch anything else. Jamal nodded slightly, taking a deep breath. Nervousness was nothing new to him. He had competed thousands of times, but never with his own life on the line. The door is open. Elbridge emerged with a Middle Eastern man, speaking in metallic English. They headed down the right corridor, just as Mark had predicted. Jamal entered the room shortly after. No guards, no cameras, just a table, 2 chairs, an unopened bottle of water and a brown leather briefcase placed right in the middle of the table. He walked over and opened the small lock on the left side of the bag. As gently as someone defusing a bomb. Just as Mark had said. A side pocket opened, revealing the fingerprint encryption device inside, the one that operated Clean Bloom version 3. Jamal attached the tracking chip to the underside of the device. Where the thin aluminum heatsink was, there was a small click. The signal had been activated. He intended to withdraw, but his eyes caught an odd detail. An old flash drive attached to the laptop inside the bag, a leather-wrapped USB drive. The kind used for ARC's internal data. Damn, he muttered, hesitated for a few seconds, then pulled out the drive. As soon as you pull it out, the small warning light at the top of the device flashes red. Jamal froze. Alert system activated. In a split second, the hallway lights flashed red. The loudspeaker announced coldly, "Security breach in sublevel C, lockdown in 30 seconds." Mark yelled into his headset, "Get out of there now. They're blocking the exits." Jamal rushed out of the room, USB drive in hand, running as if his entire childhood was chasing after him. The front door slammed shut in his face. The automatic locking system had kicked in. He turned into the side street on the right, where the air conditioning ducts hung low to the ceiling. There was no normal way out. He kicked open the vent cover and ducked into the air duct, a narrow metal corridor barely wide enough for a person to fit through. Leather boots clicked on the stone floor behind him. At least 2 people were chasing him, and they were armed. Intermont Hotel, Network Control Station 1844. In a surveillance room on the 2nd floor, Eleanor stood in front of a monitor displaying the basement corridor C. She saw the yellow dot, the tracking chip, moving rapidly. But what changed her expression was a second dot, red, appearing next to it. A second chip, strange, from the USB drive had been pulled out. Monroe stood beside him, speechless. He took something outside of the mission? Eleanor did not reply. She closed her eyes for a long moment. Then she turned and said slowly, "Summon the Grey Dragon Group. Activate command number 11. Monroe frowned. Are we really doing this? Jamal has been exposed to level 7 data without permission. He may be genetically reprogrammed. If Elbridge finds out, he will turn Jamal into a master copy. But he is Ray's son. And that's why we can't let him fall into ALIX's hands." Ventilation duct 1847. Jamal had barely crawled across when he came to a blockage, an air filter screen blocking the way. And below it was an electrical engineering room. He kicked the screen away, landing on a pile of soft, noisy wires. Without thinking, he opened his laptop from his bag and connected the USB drive. The interface appears. Project Horizon, Submodule, Bloom Inversion Protocol. The screen shows lines of DNA code, and in the middle, Antigen Target Model. Tyson, Gen Raw. Synthetic countercode detected. Status, active. Jamal was stunned. His genetic structure, his own, had been analyzed and integrated as a reverse key for Clean Bloom. Not only that, the system could also generate a vaccine against the virus itself, provided that his entire codebase was implanted into the biological server. In other words, if you fall into ALIX's hands, they can create a vaccine against every version of the virus they have. And become invincible. Suddenly, the door was kicked open. 3 men in black entered, reflective glasses. No badges. Grey Dragon. An assassination unit that is not affiliated with any country. It only takes orders from the underground network. Jamal grabbed his laptop, dashed out the back door, crashed through the maintenance shaft, and bolted down the fire escape. You don't need to think anymore. There is no side that saves this world. If he wanted to survive, and save something for his father, he had to choose a side. A side that didn't exist on tactical maps. Zurich HB train station 3:58 a.m. The rustling of snow hit the train windows. Jamal sat silently in the last row. His hoodie pulled down over his head. His headphones plugged in, but no music playing. He silently watched each person getting off the train. His eyes searching, alert as if every shadow could be a stalker from Alex. On his lap was a thin backpack. Inside were the 2 most important items. The USB drive contains the original Clean Bloom code that mentions Tyson, Gen Raw. A copy of the genetic code. Only one person in the world has ever understood it. Reeve. Reeve, real name Jackson Reeve, R3 level cryptography engineer. Former reverse engineering developer for the ARC project and sole survivor of the internal purge. After the incident, he disappeared from the world as if he had never existed. According to the file that Eleanor kept, Reeve used the fake identity of Elias Koenig, currently hiding in a remote monastery near Dienton im Hochkönig, southern Austria, a place protected as a separate world. No network, no signal, no camera. If Eleanor wasn't lying. 724 Dienton, Austria, road to Hochgrat Monastery. Jamal's rented pickup truck swayed over snow-covered slopes. Outside, the pine forests were white and eerily silent. The GPS had no signal. He was following a paper map, a thing thought to be extinct. But now the only thing that could guide him. Hochgrat Abbey loomed in the mist like a medieval fortress, thick stone walls. A bell tower silhouetted against the gloomy sky. The large wooden gates were ajar. Unguarded, Jamal stopped the car, removed his gloved hand, and tapped 3 times in the signal Eleanor had taught him, the code for ARC. A moment later, the gate opened slightly, and a silver-bearded man in a monk's robe looked at him with a half-suspicious, half-mocking gaze. "You're 2 years too late," he said in heavily accented English. "I think I'll be dead before anyone remembers the name Reeve." 745 The Crypt Room. Monastery basement. Jamal sat across from Reeve, placing the USB drive on the cold stone table. "Here's the new Clean Bloom code. And my gene reaction template." Reeve stared at Jamal. "Ray Tyson is my friend. The only person in the ARC who refused to sell his soul to the government." "You're like him. Can you decode it?" Jamal asked. Reeve plugged the USB into an old computer, an offline operating system he had rewritten from the Windows XP era. Just a few minutes later, the lines of code appeared. Bloom 3_seed_genera_active, decode protocol. Unlocked. Reeve paused. "Damn," he whispered. "They did it. They integrated the reactive genes from your blood into the entire code. What does that mean? You are the final key, not just to destruction, but to immunity. If someone injects this virus into an individual carrying your genes, they will survive. The rest will die. Jamal shuddered. That is, if someone cloned me, or created a genetically equivalent version, they could create a new generation of overhumans, a new species of humans. Completely immune to all forms of biological attack based on the clean bloom. Outside the monastery 803. No one in the monastery knew that another person had arrived. In the pine forest, a dark figure sat in a matte-painted SUV, holding a thermal scanner. The man wore sunglasses and a satellite-connected headset. His eyes did not blink when he saw Jamal's heat signature appear in the monastery's basement. He pressed the button. Target confirmed. Tyson. Reeve signal. Initiate phase 2. 3 other men nodded. They carried silent guns and masks, Alex soldiers. A biological recovery unit. Codename. Aurelius Cell. Basement 807. Jamal felt a chill down his spine. You said if I get caught, they will use me as an opening code. No, Jamal, Reeve said softly. They already did. And you were the final prototype. No way. Eleanor didn't tell you? Reeve looked at him. She designed the biocode. She created the protocol for converting living genes into virtual code. If she knew your genes were the source, then she knew everything from the beginning. Jamal stood up. And she sent me here to confirm? Or to get me arrested? A thud sounded upstairs. Then another. Reeve paled. Here they come. 808 Hokgrat Monastery, Level 1 alert. Jamal hurried Reeve out the back door of the cellar. Following the emergency exit that led through the ancient corridor, there was a sound of hurried footsteps above. 3 men, armed, heading in 3 directions. Reeve slipped a memory stick into Jamal's hand. Here's how to permanently erase the Gen Raw reaction structure from any system. But it can only be done once. If you use it, no one will ever be able to recover the original code. And if I don't? Jamal asked. Then Clean Bloom will become the worst legacy humanity has ever created. 813 Chapel behind. Jamal and Reeve rushed into the chapel, hiding behind the stone altar. A silenced gunshot lodged in the wall right next to Jamal's ear. He pulled Reeve, dashed through a side door, and ran down the passageway to the old wine cellar, now the fire escape. A pursuer gives chase, but Jamal kicks open the steel door blocking his way and breaks the lock from the inside. He and Reeve continued running. 820 Snowy Mountain Road behind the monastery. Jamal and Reeve emerged from the tunnel, their faces white with snow. The Alex all-terrain vehicles could not make it down the narrow path leading to the old cabin on the other side of the mountain, where Monroe had set up an emergency support base. Jamal helped Reeve onto the steps. The engineer coughed up blood. A bullet had grazed his stomach as he dashed out of the chapel. Listen, he gasped. You have a choice. Keep the original code for exchange, or delete it. Save the world from what you carry in your blood. Jamal looked at the memory card in his hand. And for the first time, he was no longer sure who truly wanted the world to be better. Bronx, New York 4:42 a.m. The corner of 183rd Street and Jerome Avenue, where Jamal and his mother grew up, was once a squatter camp. Now, the cracked pavement reflected a yellowish light under the dim street lights, as if the past had not yet left this place. An old stone bench sat beside the sidewalk, waiting quietly, and there sat Eleanor, wearing a long ash-gray coat, holding a steaming cup of coffee. No guards, no technology, no signal, just her and Jamal. He walked over, backpack slung over his shoulder, clutching the memory stick containing the source code. In his heart were echoes of Reeve, of his father, and of himself, the version of himself before he knew the name Clean Bloom. You sent me here, Jamal said, his voice calmer than he expected. I've come, one last time. Eleanor looked at him. Her face was lined with age, no longer cold, but quiet, almost tired. Do you have a memory card? Jamal nodded, but did not give in. She knew I was a reverse code. From the beginning. Eleanor nodded. From the first day I met you. But I didn't know, your father had found out too. And he chose to die, rather than let you be used as a biological tool. And you choose to keep that for 10 years? Jamal said bitterly. And then send me away like a programmed commodity? No, Eleanor said slowly. I am taking you, because I know you are the only one who has the right to choose." Both were silent. The occasional car passed in the distance. A flock of pigeons flew from the roof of the building opposite. Jamal sat down on the bench, placing his backpack beside him. "Alex has it all," he said. "The resources, the technology, the equipment. But I have the original wipe code. Once I run it, the entire Clean Bloom structure will be destroyed forever. No one, not even you, will be able to recreate it." Eleanor looked at him. "I know. So what do you want?" She looked away, toward the old row of houses. "I was an assassination coordinator in the Gulf War. I ordered drone strikes on civilian areas based on shaky intelligence. I don't consider myself a good guy. But after Ray Tyson died, I started asking myself, if the bad guys control the weapons, shouldn't the good guys keep a copy to balance the scales? And how do you feel now?" Eleanor was silent for a long time. Then she said, slowly, word by word, "Now I just see. We are caught up in the very thing we want to control." Jamal pulled out the memory card and placed it on his palm. "Reeve gave me 2 options," he said. "Keep it for negotiation, or delete it permanently." Eleanor looked at him. "And what did you choose?" A wind blew. The weeds swayed. Jamal looked down at his palms. His father's legacy. Eleanor's. A generation that believed war could be prevented by holding the most dangerous weapon. "You know," he said, "I used to be just a delivery guy. I thought my greatest job was to deliver on time. But now I understand, there are some things that if no one dares to decide, no one will live to regret." He pulled a portable decoder from his pocket, the disposable kind. Inserted the card. The system displayed. "Confirm delete. Bloom _master _gen raw _tree? Yes, no." Eleanor looked at him. Jamal placed his thumb on the yes button, but didn't press it right away. "I will do this," he said, "but you must tell me the truth, everything." Eleanor nodded. "Ray begged me to keep you out of the ARC program. I agreed, but when you saved me that day at the apartment, I understood. Ray's blood was still alive. And I couldn't ignore that. You are the last hope to end this cycle, to prevent humanity from living in a world where death is programmed into our genetic code." Jamal was silent. His eyes began to water, not from pain, but because finally, after all, he understood. No one is truly innocent. But some people choose to stand on the side of life, even when their hands are covered in blood. He pressed the yes button. The screen shows the text. "Processing, deleting master file, genetic key rewrite, successful. Clean Bloom root sequence permanently erased." The memory card glowed and then went out. The self-destruct mechanism activated. All the original genetic data associated with Tyson, Gen Raw disappeared from this world. No one, not even Alex, can recreate it. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. Tears fell from her eyes, the first Jamal had seen. "Thank you," she said, "not for deleting, for choosing." Jamal stood up. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Perhaps I will disappear one last time," Eleanor replied. "This time not to escape, but to end it. You have many people who want to kill you." Jamal chuckled. "And there are a few people I want to apologize to." She chuckled. "You included." 6:11 Start of a new day. The sun rises over the Bronx. Old buildings glow orange. Buses start running. Old people go to the market. Children go to school. Jamal stood in front of his mother's old apartment, where the plumbing needed sign his father had handcrafted once hung. He looked up at the sky, where the morning light touched the edge of the roof. No more data, no more planning, no more organization. Just him, and a world that didn't know it had just escaped destruction. A few weeks later, a normal delivery. A black boy delivering pizza on his bike passes Jamal. Jamal looked on, smiling. He turned back and handed the last package of the day to an old man. "Amazon, hello." The man smiled and signed. "Are you still doing this?" Jamal shrugged. "The world still needs people to deliver on time."